I'm sure you're asking yourself, what makes this a master class? This will be an immersive, comprehensive online experience to shift the paradigm of what we have or have not been taught about civics, politics, and global affairs. We'll make a comparative analysis of what we've learned and what we need to unlearn. That gives birth to a more educated and better informed electorate. Then we can pursue life, liberty, happiness, and property as promised. I'm Max Clark. Welcome to my masterclass. Welcome to the Clark Center for Civics, Politics, and Global Affairs Masterclass on States Power, Episode 1, Part 1. Today, we're going to be talking about states' powers. And by the end of this masterclass in Part 1, you'll be able to explain the origin of states' powers pre-existing the United States Constitution. You'll be able to define and distinguish reserved, expressed, implied, and concurrent powers. You'll also be able to identify the state's role in the U.S. Federalist system. And finally, you'll be able to analyze powers held by the states, including states' police powers. Now, at the end of Part 1, we're going to have a true or false assessment to see what you've retained. And if you have to, you can always replay it so that you can retain the knowledge that you're going to receive here in this masterclass. And while we're on the subject of power, information is power. But if you use that information properly, it becomes absolute power. Let's go to work. Now, the United States is exactly what the name says it is. It's a group of states united together to form a single nation. But what are these states? What exactly are these states? Are they independent nations? Or are they just areas of land with boundaries drawn around them? A state, write this down, a state is a geopolitical unit that has sovereignty, which means the authority to govern itself. Mexico and China, they're states, but so is Georgia and Pennsylvania. The difference is Mexico and China have complete authority inside their borders, just like all sovereign nations do. Georgia and Pennsylvania, they could have had that type of sovereignty, but they chose not to. After winning independence from Great Britain and basically becoming a group of sovereign nations, the states in the U.S. gave some of their authority away by agreeing to a little contract called the United States Constitution. Let's talk about the sharing of power, how the states and the federal government share power in order to run this nation. The Constitution is really just an agreement that the original states put together in order to form a nation that they can all be a part of. So that nation needed a government, and that government needed power. And there was only one place that power can come from, and that was the states. Because the states had absolute power. The states, they had autonomy. The states were sovereign. Now, each state already had its own leaders, their own laws, and their own legal system. Each state had also developed its own constitution years before the United States Constitution was written. The states held all the power, and in order to empower a central government, the states would have to give up some of their own. Now, they weren't too happy about relinquishing any power. So they worried that a government that was too far from the people with too much power could destroy individual liberty. In the Constitution, the states created a federalist system. Write this down, a federalist system where they would share power with the central government and give it a specific list of powers. Because states were so freaked out about giving away the power, any power at all, because they were sovereign, they created the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and it makes it super clear how the power sharing between the states and the federal government was supposed to work. And the 10th Amendment reads as such: the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So in other words, in layman's terms, if the Constitution doesn't specifically give a power to the United States government or prohibit states from having it, then the state government or the people keep that power. Powers the states kept are called reserved powers. Powers that the states kept are called reserved powers. Write that down. Now, what did the states have to give up? Well, the list of powers the states gave the federal government in the U.S. Constitution are called, write this down again, express powers. Express powers, because they are directly stated in the Constitution. Even though states didn't like giving up power, some things that it just made sense. Some things just made sense. For example, if it would be pretty messy to have 13 different states declaring war. So that power went to the federal government. Other examples include the power to maintain a military, make treaties with other nations, coin money, and make rules about who gets to be a U.S. citizen. Ultimately, the states tried to give the federal government only the powers that were absolutely necessary for a strong nation that could run smoothly. In addition to express powers, we have what you call implied powers. Write that down. Implied powers, which is not stated but not reserved. Okay, there are implied powers that are hidden within the express federal powers. For example, the power to make rules about citizenship implies the power to monitor the flow of people through the nation's borders. The Constitution lets the federal government do things that aren't specifically stated, but are necessary and proper for carrying out other federal powers. There are also what you call concurrent powers. Write that down. Concurrent powers that both states and the federal government have, and that both can exercise at the same time, as long as they don't interfere with each other. Now, normally interference isn't really a big issue because the federal and state government, they operate as two separate systems. For example, both have the power to tax, they have the power to spend, they have the power to borrow money, because both levels of government need money to function and provide services. Both levels have power to define crimes and determine punishment for those crimes. So both levels have the power to create a justice system, but the states put one big limit on themselves in the Constitution. Can anybody guess what that is? If the state and federal laws do interfere with each other, federal laws are supreme. And that's the supremacy clause in the United States Constitution. Now let's talk about police power. It's not what it sounds like when we say police power. The biggest power the states kept for themselves is one that you won't find defined in any constitution, and that's police power. And this is a sweeping power that lets states do things such as protect the health, safety, and morals of the community. It helps them to pass and enforce laws that promote the general welfare. It helps them to limit private rights for the good of the public and address major needs in a community. Now, while police power is the reason for police departments, or the reason why police departments exist, this power is about a lot more than police officers. Laws based on police power can be wildly different from state to state, and they can cover everything from the kind of electrical wire allowed in a new construction to noise ordinances that limit how loud your motorcycle pipes can be. Each state has its own needs and priorities, and states use their police powers to address issues in ways that make sense for their own citizens. Now, we can look at more power to the states. So when the states agreed to the Constitution, now this is very important, the states were the only ones with power to keep it or give it away. Again, the states were the only ones with the power to keep it or give it away. Because the states also have the power to amend the Constitution, the states could, in theory, strip the federal government of its powers by changing the Constitution. Changing the Constitution is extremely difficult because it requires a huge portion of people in states to agree on something that will become the law of the land. And we all know how hard that is. America also has over 200 years of history that's built on the system or the relationship of the federal-state power sharing that the founders created, along with the history of respecting that system instead of trying to change it. So a state power revolution probably won't happen, but we never know. We never know. It could, but that's the point. And that leads us to the conclusion of part 1 of our masterclass on states' power. And we're going to segue right into our true or false assessment on the material that we just went over. All right, guys, we're going to do a rapid fire session here. True or false? The Constitution divided the U.S. into states and gave each state some powers. That's false. The states created the Constitution. True or false? States did not have as much sovereignty as an independent nation. That's true. They gave some of that power to the federal government when they created the Constitution. True or false? The federal government has all the powers not specifically given to the states. That's false. It's the other way around. True or false? Making treaties and coining money are examples of state powers. That's false. Those are federal powers. True or false? Powers kept by the states are known as reserve powers. That's true. True or false? The states existed before the federal government. That's true. True or false? There's no way the states could ever get any other power back from the federal government. That's false. The states can amend the Constitution. True or false? Police power refers to a broad set of powers the states have. That's true. True or false? The police power lets states do whatever they want to their citizens. That's false. It only gives power to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of its citizens. True or false? If the Constitution is silent about a certain power, the federal government has that power. False. The states or the people have that power. True or false? The federal government has some powers that are not specifically stated in the Constitution. That's true. Those are known as implied powers. True or false? Concurrent powers are shared by the states and the federal government. That's true. True or false? State laws are superior to federal laws. False. It's the other way around. And finally, true or false? In a federalist system, different levels of government share powers. That answer is true. Hey, I want to take time to thank everyone for tuning in to the Clark Center for Civics, Politics, and Global Affairs Masterclass on State Powers Part 1. Part 2, we're going to get into the express powers, which is the powers that the states gave to the federal government. You don't want to miss it, I guarantee you. But in the meantime, do me a favor. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at the Clark Center. You can also follow us on Instagram at the Clark Center CPGA. At the Clark Center CPGA. Knowledge is power. Information is power. But how you use that is absolute power. Y'all have a great day.